Hey, welcome to the Head Smack podcast. My name is Paul Pavolny, and I have another misfit with me. I have Marlene Chism with me, and she says that every big problem in an organization can be traced back to a conversation that should have happened but didn't. Marlene is known for getting to the root of the problem, simplifying the complex, and increasing leadership clarity. As a coach, she works with decision makers, offering frameworks to navigate difficult conversations and increase accountability. She's a recognized expert on LinkedIn Learning with 6 courses on topics like high conflict people and difficult conversations. Marlene is the founder of the performance coaching model and author of 4 books, including her latest, From Conflict to Courage. Marlene, how you doing?
Fantastic, and thanks so much for inviting me.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think we're going to have a great time. I love a lot of the stuff that you're doing and that you're working on and that you've written about. And so I look forward to diving into all of those things today. And so I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.
All right. So what I like to do is, in starting our conversation, I do like to know a little bit more about you, a little bit about your backstory, your origin story. So tell me a little bit about yourself. You can go as far back as you feel would be relevant, but tell me the origin story of Marlene.
Well, let me start with yesterday. My backstory, for over 21 years, I was a blue collar worker in manufacturing. And I went through a reinvention, and it seems like a whole lifetime ago, which it has been. I mean, another universe ago. But it was 21 years. I was 40 when I left. But, I went through a lot of searching, understanding that in some ways, we are products of our upbringing, our culture, what we're exposed to, and what we think is a good job, what we think is a great life. And, once some of your lower level needs are met, I had gotten married and was really in a happy place in my life. And from that place, I started wanting more. Now, I didn't want more before that because I guess when your needs aren't fulfilled, you're just on survival mode. But after I found who I was going to be with and we, got our house and everything, I just started wanting something more. And I would look around and I would think, what do other people do all day long? I mean, I knew what I was doing because every single day, I would work on a line. And so you would pack cheese, stack skid, drive a forklift. And on Friday nights, you would tear down equipment for sanitation. And I thought, I know what to wear. I know when to clock in, and I know what life is like here, but what would it be like to do something else? And that was the first question. And then I think I went through what I call the 3 life tragedies. And that is when you want something more, but you don't know what it is. Then you know what it is, but you don't believe it's possible. And then finally, you know what it is, you believe it's possible, but you have to take that jump. So that's about as far back as is going to be interesting to you, I think. But but it was quite a journey, quite a journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I do want to dive into all three of those. I think those are wonderful things to talk about, as well as situations that people find themselves in. And so, let's get started there. What was the first one again? And talk a little bit about that.
The first life tragedy is when you know that you want something more, but you don't know what it is. So it's the dissatisfaction with where you are in life, whether that's in your relationship with your family or with your partner, your friends, or whether that's you think that you have more to give, intellectually, or that you're hungry for a certain kind of growth. And so I think what I've learned since then, and thank goodness I've had this long life experience now, I used to think, well, that only happens to blue collar people that want to be professional, or that only happens to people that were raised in certain environments. But the truth is, you can be at the top of your game as an executive and you can go through those 3 life tragedies because
Right.
life keeps calling us to experience more and to expand. And what I didn't know then was that understanding would help me later in the work that I'm doing now. But I thought it was unique to me at the time. And there was a little bit of shame associated with that, oh my gosh, I wasted time and didn't get my degree early. And I had all these narratives and stories about it. But I think it's the human experience that anytime we're not happy and we're really, really searching, it feels bad because we crave certainty. And
Yeah.
what I've
Yeah.
learned since then is that we can have a little bit of clarity, and the only clarity you need sometimes is just the light of a candle. And for mine, people will stay in a situation, a job, whether they're an executive, whether they're a founder, whatever, they'll stay in a situation because they'll say, I don't have clarity. I don't have clarity. What you don't have is certainty. You have the clarity that you don't want this. And so for me, I remember the point of distinction, the point of choice, where I said, I really don't know for sure what I want. I thought I wanted to be a professional speaker, but I didn't really know what that included.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't really know for sure if that's what I want because I haven't experienced it. And I don't even know if I can be successful, but here's what I do know. This isn't it. And the this isn't it was a match. It's all
Yeah.
it took for me to take the next step and set my quit date.
Yeah. Wow. That's so good. And I feel that, with, we went through the pandemic, we went through a turmoil of people kind of resetting their lives, questioning their lives. We're thrown into isolation. We're suddenly rethinking our job and, can we work remotely? Is this really what I want to do with my life? So, when people are in that place that they're feeling that stuckness, they're feeling like they're stuck and they don't know what the next thing is. They feel there's something more, but they don't know what it is. Do you have any kind of frameworks or tools that you use to kind of help people get clarity on those things or get out of that? You mentioned clarity is the
Yeah.
knowing of something needs to change, but what are some other things to kind of help them move beyond that stuckness?
That's a great question. One of the pieces that I have is sort of a framework because I found myself searching for what I call purpose. And I know a lot of people say, yeah, but I'm not called by God or the universe or whatever your spiritual beliefs are. And we're looking for signs. And the discomfort is the sign. And
Mm,
that you're getting the sign now that you don't like this, that you don't want it, that you're sick of it, but you're afraid to let go. So kind of you can see the signs and we are meaning making machines and the signs are around us, but we still get to interpret. So that can be dangerous or it can be good depending on where you are. I've seen that drive people crazy. So what I did early on, I had some clients, some coaching clients, maybe in year 5 or 6, but I saw that same pattern of people like, well, the universe said or God said. And I thought, yeah, but what would you say? Because like if
yeah.
you wouldn't say the same thing, there's a little bit of danger there. So I came up with something to give people an anchor because what we're missing is some sort of anchor. We're wanting a parent to say it's okay or this is where you need to go or a coach to tell you what to do. And it doesn't matter. Only you are going to bear the consequences of that responsibility. So this is my framework. If you don't know what your purpose is, I'm going to tell you what it is. It's to discover, develop, and deliver your gifts to the world. So if you don't know, you're in discovery mode. Give yourself a period of time and discover, explore. You don't have to attach to it, marry it, take the new job. You can volunteer, you can interview, you can shadow, you can work part-time, you can do things to say, I'm in exploration mode. And for me, I do that still. I'll explore. I'd like to do this thing. It's really not connected to my business, but for some reason I feel called. Sometimes I just want to learn something. So I'll
Yeah.
do it. It'll be an okay success, but I just think, oh, it was much better in my mind than the reality of it. There's nothing wrong with just discovering, developing. And once you get to discovery mode, which I did, like I was in discovery mode going back to college. Then I joined Toastmasters and learned about speaking. And that was really fun. And I got that acknowledgement of you're good at telling stories and you're good at putting things together in a framework. So you're developing, 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 developing. And then you start to deliver. You're doing it for pay, for free, webinars, podcasts, you're delivering your gifts. And then at some point you're in exploration mode again. So you start to juggle. It's not just one thing, it's 4 or 5 things. And sometimes you're in discovery mode and sometimes you're in development mode and sometimes you're in delivery mode. And so the more you have in those 3 areas, I think the more fulfilling your life can be.
Yeah, I love that. That is so good. And I think that's a head smack for somebody right there. And I think, probably with the exploration phase, I think a lot of people hesitate in that because of the fear of failure. So how do you deal with getting over that fear of failure? Because, experimenting, exploring, trying new things, pursuing a passion or an interest, there's that hesitation of, well, what if I fail? How do you help people deal with the sometimes a paralyzing feeling of what if I fail? What if I don't
Chances
succeed?
are you will, but it depends on your definition of failure. So is it a success to try? if that's a success, then it doesn't matter whether you met someone else that's been doing it for 10 years, whether you met their standards. We have to determine, and this is hard because we all want this acknowledgement and this yay, this applause from other people, the likes, the agreements. And you have to decide what is a success for me. And perhaps there's three levels. Maybe the one level is that I tried. The second level is three people bought something. And the next level is it becomes my career. So if you set your own standards, that's one of the tools that I would share. Another one is something that I call the fulcrum point of change. And it's a model and a method that I developed. And the idea is that nothing happens until you're in a state of willingness. So willingness is the point. Willingness is the fulcrum point of change. And the way that I don't really do individual coaching anymore, but I do group coaching. And so this is one of the concepts that I work with. If you feel stuckness and fear around something, if you can get to neutral, you're going to be okay. And what I mean by neutral is on the number line of 0 to 10, or on the number line of minus 10 to positive 10. Minus 10 is a complete failure and positive 10 is the best success you could have ever experienced. If you can be okay with either spectrum, like the total failure, oh, like an idiot, to I totally won. If you are willing to experience either one of those, because the truth is there's a yin and yang with everything. There's a heads, there's a tail, anything good, there's going to be the other side of it. It does not matter. And so the stories we make up, like if I get this big client, oh my gosh, I'll feel so successful. You do, until that big client is not happy with something you did and they start telling you that they're not satisfied. They thought you would be more than you are. Then was that big client everything you wanted? Yes, you just didn't expect the other side of that. So you have to
Right.
get to neutral. You've got to get at the fulcrum point of change to make something happen.
Right. And I think some people also have this life where they live with regrets or live with a bucket list that never got fulfilled because they were too scared to experiment, try. One of the things that I'm pretty happy with in my life is that I've always pursued areas of interest and I've failed at some
Mhm.
of them. I've realized that it's not something I want to do. It's not something that I want to pursue, but at least I pursued the curiosity. And I think
Mhm.
that's something that people need to be courageous in doing, is pursuing the curiosity of interest. Is, I'm interested in something, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to give it 100%. I'm going to give it time and then see where it goes from there. And I think that's a healthy way to do stuff, right?
Well, it is, and I love your mindset about that, because if we're in exploration phase, we're trying it, we're seeing if we like it, and it doesn't mean we don't want to do it because it's difficult. There's things I choose to do that I'm not good at, and I still enjoy it. And it's weird. I'm one of the weird people like that, but I love to play dominoes. I don't win a lot, but I think it's fun. I mean, I don't want to like strategize that much. I just kind of look at the colors and I have a good time. But
Yeah.
um, and bowling. I love to bowl, but like I went with a group not long ago, a group that I'm in, a business development group, and bowling was the activity. And I thought, wow, I love to bowl, but I've got long nails. And I thought, I don't want to be a sissy here, but I really don't want to have a nail crack down the middle. And so I had told a friend of mine on the phone that wasn't connected with this event, I said, I'm not going to go. I'm just going to cheer people on. And she said, maybe if you just like roll the ball, like you don't look good, but you just do it anyway, and I thought I will, because I
Yeah.
wanted to have the experience. I wasn't willing to like hurt myself for 1 hour of fun and then be in pain for like 2 months while you have a crack down the middle of your thumbnail. So that's just an example of I'm willing to look stupid to have a good time enjoying the crowd, because I don't need to win. I don't need to get strikes. What I need to do is feel the excitement of being with the team. As long as they're not out to win and it's okay that I'm the loser, I'm fine. I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is being willing to try stuff even if you possibly fail. But I think people still have a tough relationship with failure, and I think that gets them, that stops them from pursuing a lot of things because they think that failure is the worst thing that could ever happen. And I think one of my guests said once that they don't fail. They either lose, they either win or they learn. And I
That's
think
true.
when you have that perspective of failure, it changes everything because you're no longer saying, well, I fail, therefore I am a failure. It's like, no, that thing didn't work. I learned and I move on, right?
Right. And something I learned I took a narrative coaching course. It was really interesting. And this has helped me a lot, this one concept that your story is the source of your suffering. In other words, the way you interpret something it's the source of your suffering. And if it's the source of your suffering, it can be the source of your salvation. And it was something that when my mom was going through, like when she was in nursing care, and she's passed since, but when she was there, it was weird how my interpretation of what was going on shifted my level of patience, because when she was alive and I was helping to take care of her, and I know a lot of people can relate to this if they're in that sandwich generation, but I would get so aggravated and I would think she's not trying and she doesn't care. And I was impatient, wanting her to grow like I had grown. And we try to make people be who they are instead of accepting them. But when she went into nursing care and started losing a little bit of cognitive ability, I remember one day I thought she can't help it, and it changed my level of patience. And I thought certain things were funny. And I actually would just kind of go along with her story instead of battling with her about how things were. So that reminded me of the saying that your story is the source of your suffering. How you're interpreting will change the way you relate to people.
Right, right, right. That is so good, and I think that's something that people need to consider as well. Is, the meaning you give something affects the suffering of that, of the experiencing of that is the meaning you give to it, or the story, like you said. That is
Mm-hmm.
so good. So, what is the other tragedy you had talked about?
So the first one is you know what you want, you don't know what it is. The second tragedy is you know what you want, but you don't believe it's possible. That's, I think, the hardest tragedy, because once you think you want something, if you have a belief of I'm not worthy or I'm not smart enough or only these things don't happen to me, that belief will be so strong that you'll look for evidence to support that belief. And
Wow.
so to believe that it's possible is just I think it's to expose yourself to it more and to be around others that have done it and watch the stories you make up about why you think it was easier for them. Oh, their parents. I used to say, well, they started out on a yacht and I started out on a rowboat, one oar and no mast. So we tell ourselves things to make ourselves feel better about our lack of success or where we think we ought to be or the judgment we have about where we are. But the reality is, in reality, we don't really know if we're ahead or behind because we don't know when we're going to die. We don't know what our spiritual lessons are. We don't really know. We're making up a story once again that I should have been further than I am now versus this is where I am. And there's really good about it that I haven't recognized. And I don't know what someone else was willing to sacrifice. This was interesting not long ago, again, at this business development conference that I was at, someone said, well, what have you learned? And I said, I've learned three things. Number one, I haven't been trying. Like when I see what everybody else has been willing to say. So number one, I haven't been trying. Number two, a blind squirrel gets a nut every now and then. And number three, a dead clock is right twice a day. So I've had has been the blind squirrel and the dead clock. And I jokingly say that. But when you start to really dig into what other people have, they have a natural ability, then that's just their blessing, right? You can't be jealous of that. It's just what they were given. It's their gift. But you see what people have done to sacrifice to get to where they are, and you're not willing to do that. And if you can own that, you can say, I'm thrilled for them. I don't want to stay up all night. I don't want to sacrifice weekends. I want certain things that require me to be okay with not being all I could be if I would sacrifice. So
Right.
I think we have to be comfortable with our choices.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of things that come to mind in what you just said there, which was really, really good, is, and one of the reasons I start my podcast with hearing people's origin stories is, I've interviewed, a lot of people that have had incredible success. I mean, success that is way beyond what most people even imagine. I've talked to people that have made $100 million in 6 months, $50 million from one webinar, and we hear those stories, we hear those achievements. And we're like, well, I could never do that. But I like to kind of go back and hear their origin story and just hear the journey to that place where they were able to hit that success. And I think once we hear those stories, we realize, oh, it's not, we don't just see them on the yacht while we're on the rowboat. We realize that they started in the rowboat too, except they made some decisions along the way that kind of led them to being able to be on that yacht. And I
They
think that
did.
that makes a big difference, you know.
Yeah, there was some circumstances, someone they met, a decision that thought that they didn't think turned out, but it turned out they met someone. There's always, you can trail it back to decisions and thoughts you had. And then there's
Right.
luck too. We don't understand all of that. It's like the universe conspired, for your commitment. And so there's that too. And I think just keeping your mind in a good place, is really half the battle with this. But yeah, that second tragedy is, you want something more, and you don't believe it's possible. So that's that second one. You can stay stuck there for a very, very, very long time.
Right, right. And the other thing that you said too is, are you willing to pay what they paid for it? And, I think we a lot of times see people that have achieved a certain level of success. And when we understand what it took to get them there, they sacrificed a lot of things.
Yes, they did.
And, and we look at ourselves and say, you know what? I don't think I want to sacrifice my family, or I don't want to sacrifice having children, or I don't want to sacrifice, my health, or, I want a healthy marriage. I want to be around my children. I want to go to their games. And, we look at people and they say, well, yeah, I missed a lot of kids' games. I'm in my third or fourth marriage. I sacrificed that. And
Exactly.
so, something pays for the sacrifice.
It
And,
does. Yeah.
uh,
I used to say this was something that guided me, and it probably kept me from certain levels of success. And I truly own this choice because it's just something that's true to me. But one of my decisions is that I will never do anything for which I may feel resentment. And so what
mm,
that means is if someone says, well, we'd love you to speak at our conference and we don't have money this year, but we promise you that next year we will hire you for that. Like I say, no, it's not about the promise. It's about what can we do now? What's equitable? What's fair now? Because if I put my faith in someone else's promise that they can't possibly keep for whatever reasons, then I'm setting myself up for a bad feeling about them. And that's not good for your inner being. So I
yeah.
just would say I don't do anything that I would be resentful for. If I do something free, fee, whatever I do, I do it because I want to and because I
Right.
see value in it.
Yeah, and I think it's good for people to also have those things decided on. Like, here are my core values. Here are
Yes,
my things that I will do and will not do, and sticking with them, because then you are able to step into experimenting and exploring and trying and moving past stuckness with a clarity on who you are and what matters to you and what you're about. Right?
that makes a big difference.
Yeah. And so, what's the third tragedy?
It's you know what you want, you believe it's possible, and now you have to be willing. It's that fulcrum point of change. Now that you have some belief, you have to face what you talked about, your fears. You have to be willing. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to be embarrassed. You have to be willing to the worst feeling I think in growth is that awareness that we all seek. But when we seek higher and higher levels of it, depending on where we're wanting to go, the natural thing that I want to say the natural experience that comes from an elevated awareness is aversion. Because when you thought you were pretty good and then you're living in this life of, I've made it happen, high five, let's raise the roof. And then you find out you're like mediocre at best. That is so painful. And
Yeah.
so once you've had a little bit of wisdom and age on you, you're like, you get ready to grow, fulcrum point of change. I'm going to make the decision, and I'm going to be so embarrassed at some point of what I thought was good. But that's because your understanding changes and your standards change. So what was success 5 years ago is really a failure now because you have a new standard and new awareness.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. And so, one of the things that you've talked about, and you've used the word several times in our conversation already, and I want to kind of dive in a little deeper into that, is that clarity can change any situation. Talk about that for a little bit. How clarity is, I love the idea of clarity. I have a t shirt that says, clarity through action.
Love it. Love it.
Sometimes you got to step out of the boat and realize the water holds. And so, so talk a little bit about clarity from your perspective and how you help people with that and how to help people get unstuck.
Yeah, when I first started understanding this, and most of mine comes from experience and just my own narrative and what I've learned and the research I've done, but I had a saying, a three-part saying in my first book, Stop Workplace Drama. And the first saying was, in all drama, there's always a lack of clarity. So if in all drama,
Mm.
and I define drama as any obstacle to your peace and your prosperity, and that creates these other things that are manifestations of that internal drama. So if in all drama, there's always a lack of clarity, the next piece of that is the one with clarity navigates the ship. And then sometimes I'd say, and everyone else shovels coal. So if you're shoveling coal, like on the Titanic, you're not guiding the ship. You're shoveling coal to
Yeah,
keep it going. So that happens in leadership a lot. You wonder why you're shoveling coal, and the troublemaker is the one, kind of guiding the ship. So in all drama, there's always lack of clarity. The one with clarity navigates the ship, and clarity can change any situation. Now, I've altered that since my first understanding to say that it's not really accurate to say that clarity can change any situation, because if someone died, if your business blew up, the clarity does not change what happened, but it changes your experience of what happened.
yeah,
So it will change any experience. So that clarity, even about your past, the clarity about what you want, what you don't want, the clarity about what worked, what didn't, it will change your experience of even your past. And so the
yeah,
first question I ask when there's any kind of drama or conflict, I will say, I'll say, where's there a lack of clarity? And I want to share how that came to me. I started getting coaching clients that were, in my opinion, in my assessment, a lot more successful than me, um, had big titles, had backgrounds that were executive C-suite, project managers, whatever. And I remember sometimes when they would start talking, back then I didn't really have much of a process. I'm just learning my coaching process, but I would think, oh my God, this is popcorn in the wind. There's so much here. And I felt this need to understand everything that they were saying and even understand their business, their role, what they did professionally. And one day something calming came over me, and a voice or something, an inner voice said to me, you don't need to know everything they know. They know what they know. They already have learned and studied. They're experts at what they do. You don't need to know that, and you don't need to give them advice. Your job is to help them gain clarity. That's your only job. And you'll
mm,
do that through listening, through asking questions, through clarifying what they want, what they don't want, and digging into why they want it. Because usually when what we say we want is not the first thing. It's usually about 3 or 4 layers deep. And so I learned that every single time I hear a lot of drama and a lot of complaining, I'll say, where are they unclear? That is always my
yeah.
first question.
Wow. So, how do you, for somebody that is feeling the unclarity, they're feeling stuck, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling like they don't know where to go to next, whether it's their personal life or whether it's with their business, what are some steps that they can take to start getting some clarity?
So, one thing that I think they can do is ask the question, what do I want? And that's a big, big question. And sometimes that is too big of a gap for people. They know what they don't want. So maybe that's where you start, because in knowing what you don't want, you could write a list of everything you don't want. And on the right side of the column, you could say, okay, what's the opposite of that? So that gives you
Mm,
some clarity right there. That's one way to get clarity, because we have no trouble saying, I don't want, I don't want, I don't want, I don't want to argue. I don't want to go into debt. I don't want to lose my business. I don't want employees that are not, don't take initiative. So what do you want? I want to stay in business. I want to have employees that take initiative. Then you can start defining that. So that's a good way to
yeah,
start,
love
is
that.
don't want.
That is so good. And so, when it comes to, you mentioned also conflict and culture and things like that, that it happens and drama happens when there's some place that doesn't have clarity. Do you have a set of questions that you ask, or a set of things that you expect from people to be able to answer or talk about that helps identify where they're stuck, and if they're stuck, and where the problem lies?
Yeah, so I want to share this framework first. I call this the SAND method, and it has to do with the releasing resistance, which is still attached to the fulcrum point of change. I know these are weird terminologies, weird words that you haven't heard, but the first thing I look at when I'm trying to see if someone's in resistance, because stuckness is a level of resistance internally. And I often say there's no conflict unless there's an inner conflict first. So if you clear up your inner conflicts, you'll clear up everything else. Everything starts internally. You can blame the situation, you can blame other people. And while there's truth and facts in that, the real truth is, if you're conflicted internally, you'll create conflict externally. So I look for, where are they stuck? attached, negative, or distracted. Those are signs of resistance. And so if someone's really negative, what I might do to work with them is to say, I want you to just shift your language for 1 week. Just try this. Instead of talking about what you don't want, talk about what you do want. Instead of criticizing, look for where there is value. Instead of being negative about yourself, look for ways to forgive yourself or to make a course correction, because you can change it if you don't like it. If you've recognized it, there's no reason to stay in the pattern. So I look for the resistance first. And so that would be my first step, is to say, where are they, if I was coaching? And I do this with myself too: stuck, attached, negative, or distracted. And leaders can do this with their employees if they are inclined to be more of a mentor and a coach with their employees instead of a disciplinarian. You can just say, okay, so they're in resistance because they have the signs. They're really stuck on the way we did it last year. Okay, so my 3 levels of questions, if I were teaching this to managers, let's say mid-managers, and there's different things I teach to different levels, but if there's a lot of negativity and stuckness, the questioning, the coaching to empowerment goes like this: what do you want? What are your choices? And are you willing? It goes in that order. So the first question is, what do you want? When you ask someone this, and I've asked entrepreneurs, I've asked founders, and it's really interesting. So your listeners can try this with someone that's complaining in a place of stuckness. When you say, you got to hear them first. Like, no one likes to get advice and be judged. We all want to be heard and acknowledged. Our pain is real. So if you say, that sounds difficult, or I hear you and it sounds like you're really unhappy, you're really stuck. If they say yes, you've cleared the first part, which is listen and acknowledge. Then the next part is, so what is it that you want? Or you could say, if a magic genie was here and they could wave a wand, what would you want? When you ask that question, what you're saying is, we're in a boat, we're going to an island. What island are we going to?
Yeah.
So here's what they're going to say instead. You need to hear what happened last year that was unfair. That's a distraction. That means they don't want to talk about what they want. They're focused on a problem. And you say, I understand that happened. I know about that. But the real question is, what do you want? Well, last week, what someone did to me, or I can't have what I want. So you have to answer the first question, because you can't help someone if they don't know what they want. You can't want it for them. And so if the island is 5,000 miles away, you could then say, well, what do you want this week? Like, in other words, shorten the gap, because if it's too big and they're going to drown in that. They don't have the resources to get there. So what do you want is the first question. And then after you say, after they say, well, they're going to do this. This is another distraction. I want Jack to be fired. Well, what do you say to that? You go, oh, wow. Well, I'm not going to fire Jack. And now you're playing verbal ping pong. I can't have what I want. That's what I want. Instead, what you do is objections die on agreement. So you say, well, if that was possible, what would that give you that you don't have now? Well, I could get my work done and I wouldn't have to stay over every day an hour till 6. So what you want is to leave work at 5. And what you want is to have more collaboration instead of this argument. Yes, that's what I want. See, they think that firing Jack is the way to get there. So I call that getting stuck on the rock called how. If this will happen, then I'm going to be happy, versus what I really want. The core of it is, I want to have peace and prosperity. That's all I ever want. And I think I know the way to get that. But the truth is, if I knew that, I could have already done it. So when we're coaching people, we say, what do you want? And we try to find what's peace and prosperity for them. I want to feel happy in my job. I want to feel like my work matters. I want to make more money. And you can say, well, what would that give you that you don't have? And we all want to make more money. So it's going to be material things, or some sort of security is what it's going to be. So it's, what do you want? And then after that, it's like, well, let's explore your choices. And so I say responsibility is at first the recognition of choice. If someone cannot recognize their choices, they can't be responsible. So when someone says, I don't have any choices, they're in victim mode, and you cannot solve that. People have to see their choices and feel empowered and have autonomy in order to move forward in those choices. So what are your choices? And like, I don't know what my choices are. Then I would say, then I want you to think about that, and let's talk again tomorrow. The mistake we make as coaches and leaders is say, well, you got 3 choices. You can like it, you can lump it, or you can leave.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, wow, like, I knew it. I knew you wouldn't support me. But if they come up with, well, I could quit, I could I could get a different degree and elevate my pay, or I could work a third shift, or I could do whatever, work part-time from my computer at home. And there's different choices, but they have to be willing to take those choices. And so if we look at someone
Mm,
as a victim and we make it better, we've not helped them to grow their wings. So what do you want? What are your choices? And then it becomes, are you willing to pay the price for a period of time to sacrifice that sleep, to get that degree, to do the things to get on that yacht? Like, are you willing? Because willingness is where change happens. And if they have
yeah.
excuses, they're not willing.
Right, right. Now, which one of those is the hardest hurdle or the hardest mindset to get through?
Mm.
Because it seems to me like maybe the first one is, understanding what you want. I mean, you can maybe deal with, I want that person fired, but what about even like bigger choices? Like, what do I want with my life? I feel stuck, and we kind of talked about this earlier on. Is feeling this stuckness in life? Is that the hardest one that people
I
have to
don't
get
know for
over?
sure. I wish I did know, but like as you asked
Yeah.
that question, this is what I suppose, and I've never like really entertained which one's worse. I think whatever stage we're stuck at is the worst, but the first one, if you don't get there, you can't go anywhere else. So yes,
Right.
from that perspective, if like it's hard to say what you want. You know why? Because if you don't believe, it's life tragedies again. If I say what I want and I can't have it, I feel like a failure. And
Yeah.
if I say what I want, I also have to dig a little deeper. Oh yeah, I want to be a millionaire and be on Dancing with the Stars. Okay, why? What would that give you? Like the real reason we want anything, this is my theory, is peace and prosperity. You think the thing that would get you're talking about the how to versus what you really want. What we always really want is expansion. We want peace. We want prosperity. If we have cancer, if we have an illness, the only thing we want is to be whole again. That's the only thing we want. We don't say, well,
Right,
I'd love to
right.
have that jet. I got to do that before I die in 3 months. We don't say that. We say, well, I want to feel good again. I will never take it for granted again. I'll stop smoking. I'll stop drinking. I'll work out because all I want is this expansion, which is a healthy body. And so we don't appreciate what we already have until that's gone. And the things we think we want, we're not very honest and truthful with ourselves or with others. So digging and drilling down, and it always boils down to a feeling in a sense. It boils down to an experience, not really the jet or the new home or the place in Italy, which can be fun. If you've got those kind of resources, maybe that feels good. But we really want to feel good, and we want expansion. We want peace and prosperity. We want a problem to be gone, or we want an opportunity to be born. And so that's really what we want. And if we kind of know that, we can say, well, what do I want today? Like I know that I have felt good just doing things to step out of my comfort zone. For example, sometimes when I travel, I'll look for places that offer Lindy Hop or swing dance. And even though I'm like a single older, and that's not single, but I don't have a partner with me. Like I'm a woman by myself going to a place I don't know. There's something thrilling about knowing that I have the courage and the willingness to do it, even though I'm scared to death that I'm going to like not have fun or not get asked to dance or like I call it re-entry when I do something like that. I walk in and it's like I'm entering a different atmosphere from the Earth's orbit. I'm like, oh, this feels horrible. And then
Yeah,
once I get to know the people and I start having fun, it is a thrill like I cannot even explain. And the only reason it's a thrill is because I stepped outside of what was comfortable for me and I did something which only reinforces my own self-trust and resilience.
that is so good. That is so good. Well, and I think that there is growth in, trying things that are totally outside of your regular category of doing things as well, because it might not necessarily be immediately tied into who you are and what you do and your profession, your interests or whatever, but you can learn something from it. You can gain something from it, even if it's just a head smack, just something in that moment, that it's like, wow, okay, yeah, I hadn't thought about, this situation in my real life until I saw it from this perspective because I'm trying something different, right?
Hmm. And speaking of a head smack too, I think you'll like this story. When I was before I was really, I mean, it was my first few months being out of my job, and I didn't understand what it meant to be a professional, and I didn't understand networking. There was so much I didn't understand, and I respectfully say I was a blind man with a cane searching for the next curb. And
Mm.
I went to a professional conference on the advice of some people that I knew that, I was in a professional organization just trying to find my way around. And I went to this event in Fort Lauderdale. I'd never been to a conference. I didn't understand conference life. And I really felt like a fish out of water. And I looked around and there wasn't anything I wanted to learn. And this is really funny to me now. It was about publishing and about PR. And I'm like, I never want to write a book. I just want to be a professional speaker. Well, if you're going to be a speaker, you better write books. And like, I don't want any of this. I just want, how do you become a professional speaker and get paid for it? And I was just wandering around trying to make this happen. And on the last night, there was this banquet, and it was an awards banquet, and it was a black tie, kind of a black tie event. And so I dressed up and knew how to dress. And I noticed at the table there were award winners at my table, and that totally intimidated me. And I remember thinking, I hope nobody asks me about myself because I don't have anything interesting to say. And there was a woman there from Atlanta, Georgia, or maybe Washington, D.C., and another one from Atlanta, Georgia. And I remember I had all these negative thoughts. I thought, I live in, hillbilly town, Springfield, Missouri, and they're living in these metropolitan places. And I feel so, I feel so embarrassed. And one of the women said to me, and I remember thinking, okay, I feel like I'm coming out of my skin. My anxiety was so high because I was self-judging and because I hadn't been in that experience. And I was afraid to be kind of found out. And, people don't think about you near as much as you think they do. That's one thing I've learned.
Right, right.
But I'm sitting there and one of the women said, well, you look beautiful tonight. And I kept thinking to myself, just stay here. Even though you're miserable, stay here. I just wanted to take off so bad. If I could get a meal in my room and just get out of this situation. And this was my mantra. I said, when it comes to growth, and I was so committed to my growth, I said, for me, comfort is not a requirement. It's not a requirement that I'm
Mm.
comfortable. It's a requirement that I sit here and feel whatever is going on. So I remember thinking, comfort's not a requirement. Comfort's not a requirement. What I've learned since then is just talk about other people. They want to talk about themselves. They're not curious about you, really. And so this woman said, you look beautiful tonight. I said, thank you. And the other woman said, are you having a good time? And I said, no, actually, I'm quite miserable. But fortunately for me, comfort is not a requirement. We both went, oh.
Yeah, wow.
So that's where I was at that time, 26 years ago.
Yeah, I love that. Comfort is not a requirement
Yeah.
because we sometimes can be lazy and expect that comfort is the only way. And if we don't feel good about it, if we're not comfortable in it, if we're not have peace, then
Yeah.
that's the ultimate way of living. But I think it's sometimes when we get into those uncomfortable spots, into those things that we're not used to, when we try things and we fail, and that's not comfortable. Failure is not comfortable, but we find growth in those times. We learn something. We learn something that doesn't work. We learn something that we might like. We learn something new, or a new perspective, or a new way of looking at things. And you look at any great discoveries, any creative discoveries, scientific discoveries. It's sometimes taking something from totally unrelated and solving a problem that you're having because you're looking at it from a different perspective, where you got new information or new insight or new way of looking at it. And I think we hurt ourselves when we don't allow ourselves to try those different things that sometimes are uncomfortable.
Yeah. And, something that's really fun for me now, and I've learned this over time, but I don't need to be important. I don't need to be important. I'm so interested and curious because I crave knowing the experiences of other people and how they see things. And, we're all seeing this world so differently. And we know just enough not to bump into the furniture as far as like, we don't see things the same way. We just kind of know
Yeah.
the outline of how things are. And so for me, I'm so interested in, neuroscience and psychology and how people think and what their experiences were and what their drama is. And I really want to be a safe space for people to just be who they are. And like, I'm just curious. And I think getting rid of the need to be important or successful has been amazing, to enjoy other people and not be competing with them in your head. And, like I was early on, it was really, I was so much judging myself that I couldn't be in the same room with other people because I had stories about what it was. And,
Wow.
I don't have those stories now. Like, I know everybody's got pain. Everybody's got a different path. They've got a different life lesson. And I'm just interested to know what it is.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about personal responsibility. One of the things that you talk about is that truth can hurt or set you free. Um, and it's dependent on your relationship with personal responsibility. So let's talk about that for a second. Talk about truth and personal responsibility.
Mm, that was a huge concept for me to take on a new direction. And it's still a big concept for me when I'm not happy about something, because if I'm not taking responsibility for it, like, I'm the only one that can take responsibility for my inner world. Yes, people can upset me and people can do wrong things and people can be uncivil and there's all kinds of things people can do and there's facts around that. But when I had that awareness, I learned something that I've kind of used and sort of tweaked it in my own way. But it's a concept by a company called the Oz Principle. Have you ever heard of them? The
That
Oz
sounds
Principle.
familiar, but I
It's
don't
an
know it
old
that well.
leadership book, and they're probably still in business. I don't know, but I learned some version of their concept of living above the line. And living above the line is responsibility. And so
Mm,
living below the line is, I believe it was blame, resentment, justification, and judgment. So what I've learned since then is that even my experience that I shared with you where I was in self-judgment, that's not living above the line, because I'm not being responsible to myself and to my journey. I'm being judgmental of my journey and it's blocking my connection. It's blocking my prosperity. And so when we're blaming other people, it's saying that if you would be different, I would not feel how I feel. And maybe
mm,
that's true and maybe it's not. But part of it's just the story I'm telling myself. And so it's always, what do you want? What are your choices? And are you willing? And so it's, responsibility is the recognition of choice. And you can only be as honest as your level of self-awareness. So when you say, well, I'm honest, and or when you get disappointed because someone's not honest, what I remind myself is, well, if they're not honest with themselves, they're not going to be honest with me. And we can
mm.
only be as
Yeah.
aware, as honest as our own level of self-awareness. And that is, what do we want? What do we stand for? What's my values? What's my experience? And our awareness isn't a one and done. This insight came to me the other day. There's not this finish line on EQ and self-awareness. Like, it's not like I see these EQ speakers and awareness type speakers going, your self-awareness is the key. And you're either self-aware or you're not, or your EQ is there. It's not a there or not. It's ongoing depending on what life circumstances you throw yourself into or what occurs, because, like, I don't know myself as a person going through a divorce because I've never had that experience. So I don't
Right.
have
Right.
the awareness. I can judge someone else all day long, but I don't have that experience. I don't know myself as someone facing a terminal illness. So my self-awareness is not in those areas because I haven't had it. You see what I'm saying?
Right. 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 Yeah, and I think we do. It's hard to say that there's a finish line, and I mean, I'm a Christian, and I believe in the Bible, and Paul, he says, I haven't finished. I still race. I've got a race ahead of
All
me.
right.
I don't feel like I've finished, and I think we're all kind of like that. We think that there's this ideal place that we'll once get to, and we've finally achieved, we're finally happy, because even when we see people that get to those levels that we look at as having achieved, you talk to them and they're like, I'm not satisfied, I'm not happy. I can go out and buy a yacht tomorrow if I wanted to, but I just feel like I'm not there. I don't feel like I'm fulfilled. And so I think we do have different versions of ourselves. We do have different situations that change everything, and we don't know how we behave when we become that new person that happens to. Like, for me, my mother passed away a couple of months ago, and I've never been motherless before, and I'm having to adjust what life is like being that,
I
now
do
that
know.
there was no way to prepare for it.
Mm-mm.
There's now a new version of me that I could not have planned for, that I have to now adjust to.
I love what you're saying, and I couldn't agree more. Insights that I've had even 4 years later, it's interesting how my awareness has changed. And I heard someone at a party the other night talking about their mother-in-law and how they were, so negative and so difficult, and she's got her needs met, and yet she's so negative, and we keep saying, we're not going to deal with that negativity. I thought, oh, I see myself in that. I see what I used to do and how it's not good. It's not how I would want
Right.
to be again. And I said, can I share a perspective that I hope is healing for you? Sometimes people just want to be acknowledged and understood, even in their negativity. And we've all been negative, depending on our energy system and everything. So I used to be mad at my mom and think she didn't try. She didn't try hard enough. And like maybe trying for her is different than what it is for me. And so it's like one of my philosophies. I try to live it. I don't always, but is to listen first, and radical listening, meaning that if I can listen and acknowledge, it doesn't mean I agree. It doesn't mean that I don't see your choices, but if I can meet you where you are, weep with those that weep and cry, that's a spiritual concept too. There's so many, you
Right.
mentioned that you're a Christian, and really, my upbringing was that, and there's so many verses, that have helped me, and one right now that I think is really useful for us in our country and the situation that we're in. While everybody's pointing fingers, at each other for being a hypocrite, the idea of pull the log out of your own eye so you can clearly see to move the splinter out of someone else's, for
Right.
me, that keeps me grounded to say, while I think I have this awareness, I'm not them. And so
Right.
where do I lack awareness? Where do I do that same thing? Where have I done that same thing so that I can have compassion instead of, oh, I'm the sage on the stage and do what I say? No,
Right.
everybody's
Right.
on the
Right.
same journey.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things about that reference that you shared is, the log and the splinter are both made of the same thing. They're both made of wood, right? And so we look at the splinter in somebody else's eye, or the log, and we miss the log in ours. And sometimes it's because the very thing that we're angry about is something that we're not willing to deal with, that's inside of us,
So
that's in
true.
our own eye.
And once we forgive ourselves and we stop judging, for me, I've done a lot of work on just stop judging your journey. Like it's just your journey. You don't need to like hide it, but you don't need to display it either. It's just your journey. And so once you make peace with a lot of that, you're just so much more compassionate, because like the other day, someone that young, that's 39, was kind of struggling with some stuff. Oh my gosh, I don't have, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. And she said, Marlene, how can you be so chill? And I said, no one has ever called me chill, because I've been an anxious, impatient person most of my life. But
Yeah.
when she asked that, I said, I think I can tell you why. Because I've been 39, I've been 49, I've been 59, I haven't been 69 yet, but I
Yeah.
have been those ages, and it's all going to be okay. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we started talking about truth, and truth can set you free, and it can hurt. When does it set you free, and when does it hurt?
It hurts if it's been something you've not been willing to see, or that you were unaware of, and someone else sees it as a truth, but you don't. If
Mm,
you're misunderstood and someone says, well, you're really impatient, or you're really aggressive, or like I've often been told I'm really intense. And I don't see myself as intense, but because I'm funny, but I am intense in certain ways. And I forget that I'm getting so intense, and someone else is like, back off. And so I think whenever someone sees something in us that we think is a bad thing, instead of just saying, yeah, I
mhm.
can be intense, I really can, it's funny. If
Yeah.
I think it's funny, it's not a bad thing. If I think you shouldn't be intense and women should be more feminine, then I think it's a bad thing. So now that hurts. And now I want to work on it, because I want to be understood. So when we
Yeah.
make peace with things that others see about us, whether it's true or not true, we can be like at peace with that and say, yeah, some people perceive me that way, and women have been conditioned to be this or that, and that's just how that is, and I'm okay with it, because when people know me, they like me. And
Yeah.
so I think it hurts when we want to deny something that others see. And when it
Mm,
sets us free is when we own it and say, what are my choices? Am I okay with it, or do I want to shift some of that?
yeah. Yeah. And so, one of the things you talked about is, change and clarity and getting unstuck. And so, talk a little bit about, that state of being, that place where change happens. Talk a little bit about that, and how we do that, how we get to that place, because it's been a great conversation. We've talked about so many great principles that I think are going to help a lot of people as they listen to this. But let's talk about that state of being that allows change to happen.
That's willingness. Willingness is a fulcrum point of change. So we can say, am I willing to try? Yes or no?
Mm.
Am I willing to fail? Yes or no? What does failure look like? So am I willing to be surprised? Yes or no? Am I willing to be uncomfortable? Yes or no? Because in the willingness, and this, it's a forgiveness work in a way. There's a spiritual component to this, that when, like, for example, some of the coaching I used to do with this, when someone really had resentment towards someone, I would say journal, 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 and let all your anger out, and go ahead and let the blame out. Look at your dark side. Look at all the things you're thinking that you're not going to say. And then when you feel like you've exhausted it, say, but I'm willing to see it differently, or I'm willing to be willing to see it differently at some times. There's a willingness that does the work. It's not the
Mm.
actual, you don't have to do penance. You don't have to like bow down 10 times or like, thumb some beads. I mean, you don't need to do it. You just need to say, I'm willing to explore, I'm willing to see it differently. And in that state, you've cleared out all this stuck, attached, negative, distracted stuff. You've cleared it out, because whatever
Mm.
comes is like, it's just okay. Like, wow, I'm willing to feel some discomfort here, willing to have a bad year in business to try this new direction. But I'm also willing to be really successful. So like, you don't get stuck in I'm willing to have a hard time and have a bad business this year. Well, be willing for it to be the opposite of that too, because anything you create has both sides anyway. So the
Yeah.
more ready you are for both sides of it, the easier and more in flow you're going to be.
Wow, that's so good. And what about if you're in that state and you've got that willingness, but you feel powerless, like you feel like I don't think I have the ability to do it. I don't think that I'm capable of doing it. How do you deal with that?
Well, that would be negative probably on the stuck, attached, negative, distracted. So you're back in resistance. So the key
Mm.
is to notice resistance, and it's not a one-time deal. So at every level, like, okay, now I have this resistance if I can't do it. So am I willing to be uncomfortable in that not knowing today? Am I willing to do 15 minutes of research? Am I willing to reach out to someone who might know, who, not how? That's a Dan Sullivan strategic coach concept. Am I willing to ask someone that does know? Am I willing to pay for that knowledge? Because sometimes we're just stuck. We don't want to pay for the knowledge. Like, there's been a lot
Yeah.
of things I don't know how to do, and I got to pay someone for it, and it's expensive. But if I want it and I don't know how to do it, I can either go to school and learn it and go against the grain of what I like to do, or I can just pay someone that already knows, and maybe they can teach me along the way if I want that. But there's always a lack of willingness in resistance, always. So if you feel I'm stuck, I'm this, it's like, okay, I'm resisting. So what did I need to be willing to do?
Wow, this is so good. I can't believe it's already been an hour. This is amazing. So talk to, you've got a lot of things available online, and I want you to talk a little bit about the performance coaching model that you have online. Talk a little bit about that.
So I authored a book, and it's already 4 years old. I can't believe it. It's From Conflict to Courage: How to Stop Avoidance. And in chapter 7, there is a blueprint for difficult conversations. So long story short, at some point I recognized that leaders are meant to have conversations about performance and behavior. They do not have the skills, the capability, or even the capacity to do it. And so if you can learn a skill set, that helps a lot with that anxiety. If you know where to start, if you know how to analyze the problem. And so that was in chapter 7. It's called the Blueprint for Difficult Conversations. And then last year, when I had knee surgery, maybe it was a year and a half ago, it was in 2025, 2024, into 2024, I built an online course called the Performance Coaching Model that teaches all of that process and step. So that really, it's usually sold in corporations that decide to have me in for, a day or two workshop. And then we filter people into that so they can study it deeper and in sections, in 5-minute segments. And so it's the performance coaching model that teaches you how to analyze the problem, how to have leadership clarity, employee clarity, and accountability.
Wow, that's awesome. So what's a question that you wish that I had asked you, or a head smack that you want to share as we wrap this up?
Gosh, I don't know. I feel like you've asked me almost everything. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't know because you've asked me everything. That's not a good ending, is it? I should have.
No, that's wonderful. It's been an amazing conversation, and I do appreciate you coming on and sharing what you have. I do believe you've given a lot of practical, high value steps that people can take, especially if they need clarity, if they're feeling stuck, if they don't know how to take next steps in their business, in their life. I think they've got a lot of things that they need to, go back and listen to this a couple of times and apply it. I think that change happens not only when we just learn, I think when we apply and we execute, I think that's where the change happens. And I believe that's part of this podcast is, one idea well executed can change everything. And so I think there's a lot of great ideas that have been shared today. And so if people want to get a hold of you, I know you have performancecoachingmodel.com. What are some other ways for them to get a hold of you, to be a part of your world, to learn more about you?
LinkedIn, so you can look for me, Marlene Chism. I'm on LinkedIn. Also, my web is marlenechism.com. And my email is marlene@marlenechism.com. And the reason everything's Marlene Chism is because I'm too creative and I've renamed things 1,000 times. And I think I'm going to keep the same name. So it's just under my name.
Yeah. Well, Marlene, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate you coming on, and be sure to check out those links, marlenechism.com, performancecoachmodel.com, coachingmodel.com, as well as check her out on social media. Thank you so much, Marlene.
Thank you.
You are listening to Conversations with Misfits, Mavericks, and Trailblazers.